Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're ready to kick this webinar off. Thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasant Tuesday in New Jersey. We're welcoming the summer. But very valuable and interesting webinar today. So just welcoming everyone. The title of the webinar is Ensuring Compliance in Post-COVID Virtual World. I'm sure you've all experienced how COVID has affected our lives, and especially within pharmaceutical and biomed and device companies, how our sales teams have had to adapt to this new world of selling. So today I'm hosting a very good friend of mine, Donna White. I've known Donna for a couple of years now, and of course she's a very valuable customer of ours as well. And I'll do a quick introduction about Donna. She asked me to keep it as short as possible so we can get to the content, but I'm sure you would like to you'd like to know a little bit more about her. And of course, she can chime in later in the content as well. So Donna currently holds the position of Vice President Compliance for KAZ USA, and she's had a couple of decades of tenure in pharmaceutical industry, working in many functional areas, but in compliance at least for the last many years. And she's done compliance across a variety of different programs, pricing, government programs, XPEN, PDMA, fair market value. And she also currently serves as part of PCF's leadership team as a member co-chair. So I'm very excited to welcome Donna for our webinar today. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Mohammed.
All right, and just a quick word about myself. I'm founder and CEO of Core Data, and over the last 4 years, Core Data has built a compliance analytics solution with monitoring as well as federal reporting capabilities that we now work with over 30 pharma and device companies. And I'm known as a data geek inside my company, but we'll tackle that at a later point in time. Just a few housekeeping items. We'd like this to be very interactive, so the mode of this webinar is going to be sort of like a discussion, and we'd love to have questions from you. There is a questions box in the GoToMeeting webinar panel that you can submit through that or through the chat panel, and we'll address them either as we go or towards the end. Just a disclaimer before we get started: the views and opinions expressed by the speakers are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the companies. We'll be recording this webinar. Your lines will stay muted, and of course this all material is copyrighted. And for webinar support, if you need anything, there's a number you can dial, 832-519-1369, or happy to provide assistance through the chat window as well. Again, just one reminder, make sure that you send your questions in. If there is anything that sparks your interest, feel free to come into the conversation. We'd like to make this interactive as much as possible. Quickly going through an agenda walkthrough of what we'll cover today. We want to talk about challenges with virtual activities. We want to talk about types of virtual activities and what the conversion from real to virtual means in each of those cases and how to conduct those. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it means when we go virtual from a Transparency and Sunshine Act perspective, as well as some of the new SOPs that compliance has had to create to enable the commercial team to go all virtual. And then in the end, we'll talk a little bit more about monitoring in this world where, at least for the foreseeable future, we see virtual, maybe some hybrid, but that's going to be the more of a normal way of approaching commercial and for HCP interactions. Before we get into the discussion topics, what I wanted to do was poll the audience quickly so we can get some sense of how people are thinking about this. So the first question really is, as your field force engages in virtual activities, as a compliance person, how nervous are you? So I'll open up I'll open up the poll for everyone to kind of chime in, and hopefully you should be able to see the poll on your screens. And yeah, please participate, and we can get a quick sense of how everyone's feeling about this. In my previous webinars, I've asked whether your commercial teams are engaging in virtual activities. I did not ask that question in this webinar, assuming almost everyone has some level of virtual activities from a commercial perspective already planned and in execution. So we have almost 60% of folks have responded. I'll give maybe another 10 seconds if anyone else wants to provide how they're feeling about this. Would be a good way to at least capture everyone's feedback. Okay, we got more than 70% responses. So I'll be closing this this poll out here so we can see the results. Okay, almost 80% of the folks have responded. All right, so looks like majority of the folks are a little bit just a bit more than usual. So of course it's creating a little bit more nervousness in compliance as to how to make sure that these activities are going okay. We also have almost 1/4 of the folks, or at least 1/5 of the audience has voted to they're very nervous. Okay, for those that are very nervous, I think this will be a good webinar to kind of at least go back to maybe business as usual, or at least understand what others in the space are doing. So hopefully we'll alleviate some of those pieces here as we go through the conversation. The second polling question I had was, as you move to support more of these virtual interactions, what are the biggest challenges for your company? And of course, it is a combination of technology, IT support, of course, training, but just a different mode of engaging. So if we can get some quick responses here, that would be great to see how folks are thinking about what are some of the major challenges as we look at virtual activities of our commercial teams. And what I'm hearing, at least from our customers and in conversations with Donna and others, is that you know, while we had to make this transition sort of abruptly, and in some cases you know, companies weren't used to doing virtual, but it seems like, you know, industry is settling into some groove where there is at least approvals for some type of activities. Technology players have also come in, vendors have come in to help support this transition, and of course compliance has had to put up these newer policies, but it's kind of starting to work out. Yeah, I'll give maybe another 5 seconds or so, and we can look at the responses quickly. Okay, I think we have enough votes on this. So I'm closing out the poll, and we'll share the results here. So as we look at the biggest challenges that our audience members are facing, it looks like technology and IT support seem to be there, but the rules of engagement seems to be a major concern, and of course followed by training. Yeah, so rules of engagement is what we'll talk a lot about today, and then of course Donna will also cover how some of the training needs to be incorporated. So I think that's good. That's good. I think we'll be able to talk through some of those pieces as well. Fantastic. So with that, what I'd like to do is get started on our topics of discussion. And you know, as we noted some of the bigger challenges, as we noted in the poll. So I want to ask Donna. You know, Donna, what are you hearing? Some of the big challenges firms are facing as they move to support virtual programs.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. I got a little worried on that first question you asked. If somebody said that they weren't worried at all, I would have been shocked. I think everybody has a little bit of even business as usual. You're still doing business as usual, but doing it a bit differently, right? So you've had to embrace technology, but technology has definitely been one of the bigger challenges. I think that we were very fortunate in timing with the addition of Zoom and Teams over the recent, if you think about it, even in the past year, 6 months, 3 months prior to all this shutting down. I know that many companies had said that they were starting to move into these new platforms. Things like Viva, Engage, I've heard mentioned, and some of the other, CRM systems that have ways and tools that are technologically sound for use and moving, not just virtual interactions. When we say virtual interactions, I think, to your point, you asked earlier, are people doing something? And pretty much everybody is doing something now, but that's really expanding out. So you need technology to do speaker programs and advisory boards and different things, not just the typical HCP interaction. So technology is certainly an area that I'm hearing from a lot of people that they probably were in better shape than they would have been had this happened a year earlier. So that's good that we've started to see that embracing of new. As far as IT support, I feel horrible for the IT team. There were so many things that had to happen all at once for them. Getting folks to be able to work remotely. A lot of that required, applications or programs. Then you have the Salesforce interactions and working with the security side of it. A lot of people aren't used to, when you're in the office and you're using your corporate laptop, you've got certain security features, built in that companies are definitely comfortable with. But then when you move to a public network where you're working, you have people that are not working on high speed, that the files that they were dealing with in the office now can't be downloaded as quickly or at all. They lock up. There's just so much IT that is definitely a group that has been spread quite thin, and then also just making sure that things stay up and running during this period. So I give a huge shout out to all the IT folks and the companies that have really just helped this virtual world go round for each of us. But there's only so many of them, and they're dealing with a lot of different things all at one time. The rules of engagement were definitely I was not at all surprised to see that as being the number one, because the rules of engagement, while a lot of things could be used and have been used, what I'm hearing from a lot of companies is that they're slightly tweaking policies and procedures they had in place. Whether that be around meals and meal limits, or whether that be the type of interactions that can be held. I think that was, companies are, to Mohammed's point earlier, you mentioned that, everyone's doing something virtual right now, and you pretty much have to. I mean, we, as of this week, have been out of the office for over 3 months, and that's a long time not to. If you haven't embraced it and gotten used to it, then it's way past that point, I guess, at this time. We really have to have our home offices set up and our routines. But when it comes to the rules of engagement that we're working under, you're not able to get out there and see somebody face to face. You're not able to. You're having to get feedback, through setting up calls. We were just talking about, people getting Zoom fatigue or Teams fatigue, that, having to take those breaks. But rules of engagement state this is how it's done. This is how we've always done. This is how we're going to do it. And so being able to be flexible is something that, a lot of people have had to embrace and learn. And for compliance people, you're flexible to a point. Nobody wants to be the office of no. Well, I think some people kind of embrace that title, but anyway, for the most part, people don't want to be the office of no. They want to be there to help people. That's why they're in compliance. They're not there to take people down. But how do you have that engagement with the internal stakeholders to find out what they need from you in order to be successful. And so the rules of engagement may have to change based off, what's happening today versus tomorrow. The other reason that they're having to change is because of the changing rules by either the federal government or states. There's, for instance, PDMA had a COVID guidance that was posted recently. And so now, there's a provision where patients can receive samples in their home, where doctors don't have to have signatures. Even there's, and I haven't talked to anybody yet who's doing this, but even sending physicians samples to their home so that they can resupply them because of telemedicine. And so I think, telehealth, the rules of engagement, just because of telehealth, that's another area. Different states are have different rules of, even who can be out, when you can be out. Some of the hospitals and offices are allowing pharmaceutical reps, but that's also by state. So if you're managing your compliance program across 50 states and the district and Puerto Rico and the other territories, it's different in all of them. And so I think there's got to be some flexibility there, because you don't know what's going to change. And then, oh, by the way, the DOJ criminal division posts an updated guidance to, what does a good compliance program look like, back, what was that, June 8th, I think it was. So again, it shows that the government is not stopping. I was on a webinar when this first happened, and there was a gentleman from the SEC, and he said, companies need to understand that we work from home regularly. The only thing that we're really kind of struggling with at this point is trying to set up interviews, because we typically would do those live. And so we're having to move some of those. So don't think that the government is just stopping working. We're still moving forward with investigations. We're still moving forward with lawmaking. We're still, rules making and things like these updates to the compliance guidance. And so it's an interesting time for us, because while you're being asked to do all these different, how do we do this? How do we do this virtually? Does it fall under our current SOPs? And does it or doesn't it? Figure it. We have a job to figure that out. We have a job to either post something that's permanent or temporary change. I know in speaking with a lot of industry people recently, they are looking at doing updates to SOPs because they don't feel like virtual interactions are going away. We've spoke with some of the hospitals who plan on making permanent changes into where and when you can have interactions with HCPs. If you're in one of the companies that actually, on the med device side, that has to be in the operating room, procedures is changing. If you look at the credentialing documents, there's about 75% of all hospitals in America that have reported policy changes directly linked to COVID. And those policies are intended to be longer term changes. So, making the decision of, is this SOP going to change permanently? Is it going to be temporary? Or do we, not need to do anything at all, is something that compliance people should be, or already have been, or have completed, if you're lucky, already made those changes and move forward. So definitely seeing a lot based off the rules of engagement, and also the changing environment and how quickly things can change from one day to the next. And, bottom line is, you have to train as these rules change, as you make, whether it be permanent or temporary changes to your policies and your guidelines. You have to make sure that you're training, and that's a whole other interesting subject in itself.
You're absolutely correct. That's a big topic in itself. But I think some of the points you mentioned, Donna, were just quick highlights. So, new technology coming into play to help us through this period. And as you mentioned, some organizations were already on this journey. So this has just expedited that transition. I guess
I do see there's a question in the queue, Mohammed.
There is a question? Okay.
Yes. What technology programs do you use going virtual? Zoom, Teams, Viva Engage, other technology and tools? I think that kind of goes with that's a crossover, I think, technology, IT, and rules of engagement. I know that many, many do use Viva, other platforms, and they have rolled out the Engage platform to be more engaging, so that those interactions have taken place. I do, the ones that I'm personally not in favor of use are the ones like WhatsApp, Kik, texting even outside of the system. You're still responsible for making sure that conversations are on label, fair and balanced. So I think the tools where you can have a documented conversation, like within Viva Engage, where you can directly link to your promotional materials that have been approved by your promotional review boards or promotional review committees, PRB, PRC, whatever your company calls it. I think those are in ways you can do that in Teams and Zoom. I think the company has to find the technology that works best for that company, and it may require multiples. I think the three you just mentioned in the question, Zoom, Teams, Viva Engage, are ones that I have most personal experience with over this COVID period. Obviously, GoToMeeting and has been used, but Zoom shares, I wish I'd have bought Zoom shares a year ago. That'd been a great stock to buy. But they're ones that have certainly, and I give credit to Microsoft and Viva as well, that they've all taken leaps to really quickly roll out new platforms or tweaks to their existing platforms to help companies like us be able to continue to do business every day.
Yes, I think very, very grateful for those technology firms and as you mentioned, IT staff. I like your analogy of office of no. Nobody wants that. But then I think in the end, what you mentioned around government still looking at it as if this is business as usual, because I think one, I don't know if it was you or someone in my context did mention that on one of the webinars, a DOJ representative did mention that once this is over, of course, they're going to go back and look at all of the activities just like they would, because any of those statutes, anti-kickback or, otherwise are not going away or changing because of this. So, in the short term, they may be, as you said, even in the short term, there doesn't seem like they're changing any of their paths, but definitely mid to shorter term, they're going to come back and evaluate this period as per the law anyway. So I think that's good discussion on this. Just and we probably covered some of this anyway, but if you could maybe highlight from your area or at least your lens, what are some of the activities that have, at least for your organization or in your network, have already moved, and where do we find the most difficulties in terms of really making that a virtual path?
Hello?
Yes, Donna. Can you hear me? Donna, are you there? I cannot hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now, Donna.
Sorry, I dropped. You went quiet for a moment. I apologize.
Oh, okay. All right. So I was asking you on this slide around new virtual activities, which ones have you seen convert sort of seamlessly, and where do you see some of the more difficult challenges are when when the field force goes virtual?
For some reason, it dropped you again.
Okay, I don't know if it's let me see if I can put it out on the.
I'm sorry. So were you asking about the training piece?
No, let me put it out in the chat box. So can you see my slide that's on the screen?
As we're talking about technology, and of course we have a technology glitch.
Yeah, I'll try to repeat, but if you could highlight some of the activities that have already kind of gone virtual and will stay virtual versus
Yeah,
ones that are
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, there's quite a few that have definitely um, seen great success. I think, for the representatives to be able to continue to have HCP interactions, those. Sorry, it just said my audio connection was restored. So I think that there's a definitely between like just having the day-to-day interaction, being able to get the traditional detail piece out there, and then showing that detail piece, to an HCP and being able to walk them through it. Who would have thought a few years ago that you could do that with ease? Without having to, if you all remember not too long ago, where the person receiving the message on a virtual program also had to have the software. So, like GoToMeeting, you used to have the software downloaded, and if you're also have your IT department involved to get it loaded on your laptop. And fortunately, these new programs are not like that. So the virtual conversations, those HCP interactions, I think have been ones that definitely have gone quite well. The ones that have taken more work, but are happening, and this is where you get into, do you go business as usual, or do you have to create some new policies and procedures?
We lost your audio, Donna. I don't know if you're.
But I think the biggest, the one that I think has been the most difficult is conferences. While I think that, I have actually monitored some that we've participated in as a company, just to make sure that they were in compliance with them moving to a virtual conference. But I think that that's the ones that it's, and even found from doing, meetings that I had scheduled that were supposed to take place over the course of a week, and where everybody comes together in one room to knock something out. We had to break it into 4 to 5 day sessions for 4 weeks over 3 weeks. And so I think there's a bit of fatigue there. And I think conferences are also feeling that it's just hard to keep people, like I just made mention, I have not moved from this spot. If you're participating in a conference, that means you're going to be sitting in the same spot for a very long period of time. Whereas in conferences, typically, you go to a meeting, and then you go walk at the booths and you see people, and then you might take a break and you come back, and you just don't have that with virtual conferences. So I think those have personally for me, those have been the ones that are the most difficult. However, we found, us and other companies that are having great success with doing in-office lunches. There's definitely challenges, and we'll talk about the sunshine perspective of that momentarily. Definitely want to cover off on that while we're on the. But also things like, speaker programs. Some companies are providing meals still, some are not. It's every company has to decide how they want to, if they are going to do them, and if does the meal amount change? Is it the same? Are you going to do them at all? Will you deliver it to someone's home? We are not delivering to homes, or at all. So that takes away a lot of it, but some companies are. So it's up to each company to make that decision for themselves. The you have to consider again, technology. If you're going to do a speaker program, how can you pipe in that speaker remotely? How can you cover off in case an off-label question comes up? Are you monitoring them? Do you have a package insert readily available for attendees? Things that you would typically have to have at a conference. Are you able to provide that to them from a virtual standpoint, and it be, very present to them, that they see it, they get it, they know it's there, it's addressed. And are you going to continue to let these happen long term? And that goes back to, do we need to make changes short term, long term? What's, or have you not made that decision, but you're kind of thinking in your mind one way or the other? And it's, the world is slowly coming back. I just saw a stat that retail sales were up, for example, and if you've been out to anything, but again, it varies by state, it varies by person. And so we have to make decisions based off what we have for the here and now, but we also do have to do some planning, some what if scenario planning, in my opinion, to make sure we're not, blindsided and quickly having to change things. I think the other virtual activity that actually has gone extremely well is virtual ad boards. That one has been one, of course, an ad board has its own, specific place, and it's not just going to be something, but it also hasn't been something that's had to be halted. The ad board participants are very eager to participate still, and it is a great way using something like a Teams format where you can have that visual eye contact and see people face to face, even though you're not in the same room. I think is very, very important on some of these too, especially for like an advisory board or the in-office lunches as you're doing, the problem again is the technology. Do you have a place? Do they have a place within the office or within the hospital where they can set up a camera so you can do a live like group presentation, or are you having to do one-off and just use like a Viva Engage, you keep showing the same detail piece over and over? These are all things to take in consideration. I could go on probably for the rest of the webinar, but I think the important takeaway here is there's definitely virtual activities happening, and we need to determine what we're going to do to make sure that they're compliant and being tracked from a sunshine perspective.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the things here, though, I think that's maybe interesting is I was speaking to someone that is in the meetings management business, and while they did mention that speaker programs are effectively, in the wake of this COVID, at least the dine-in, dine-out type of speaker programs are effectively gone. But what they did tell me is that they're still having or signing deals with large manufacturers for longer term. So it's expected to come back, at some point. But I think as we move through this, there'll be an opportunity to kind of tweak, because one of the things, and not from a compliance perspective, but from a business perspective, the amount of spend on travel and logistics is going to be questioned once we're back into the groove as to whether it is justified and whether an activity can actually be conducted remotely. And I think that's one thing at least I expect coming out of this, beyond just what makes sense and from a compliance perspective, will be the cost angle as well from an activity conduct perspective. Just want to conduct another quick poll before we get to the rest of the conversations here. I know everyone's kind of engaged in some sort of training, whether it's field force or additional departments, but what kind of additional trainings have you conducted for your field force? And you can select one or many of those. I'm just launching the poll to give the audience a chance to chime in. And the idea is, one of the things as people do chime in on this poll, I wanted to mention, and we talked about that in the first discussion topic around, Donna, you mentioned different states have different requirements, and of course the laws and regulations keep changing. One of the customers we work with, what they've done is they've allowed remote detailing for the time period where the states are in lockdown, and as soon as the states open up, at least from a compliance perspective, they're not allowing any virtual, at least a meal-based virtual interaction. So they've kind of taken this binary approach where, if the states are open, they're going to only allow physical lunch being served, and then of course physically presenting or detailing. While during this lockdown, they are allowing the virtual activity to go in. So I think we're going to see some of that as well, where different companies will take a different stand once things start to come back to normal, as to what they're going to look at, moving forward. Half the people have responded already, so I'll give maybe another 20 seconds to see if everyone can kind of chime in. It'll be good to see for our next discussions, in terms of the trainings conducted and provided to different teams. Okay, I think I'm going to close the poll quickly. All right, and show the results. So in terms of additional training, it looks like, at least from our audience perspective, almost everyone that responded had done some sort of compliance training for the field force. This is great. I think this time does require that. And then we have folks doing regulatory technology training, of course, is important for these virtual programs to happen. We need to know which buttons to press and which not to, and then commercial, and then of course the new standard operating processes. Good information. I guess that was compliance was expected. So we'll move to the next. Donna, any comments on there?
Yeah, I really, obviously, I expect compliance. I do want to encourage everybody, like, you have the new SOPs, but it's a great time to take advantage of the fact that the representatives are in their homes and not out running around to do some, ongoing or tidbit training, as I like to call it, that, you have an opportunity to reach them and not have as many scheduling conflicts. So I encourage you to look at, doing something on a regular basis during this period, and taking advantage of the fact that you don't have people out in the field, that you may be able to get them on the phone to do a training on Teams or etc. So.
Okay, great. No, and I think just on that, Donna, the discussion, I guess the next topic of discussion is just around providing training and guidance in terms of, what type of trainings, what you have done, who are some of the folks responsible, how do you train them, and even from an IT perspective, do you look at how do you conduct virtual interactions, whether it's just retraining or training back on Zoom and Teams as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, I think that, again, just like we were just talking about, it's going to be that question that you just mentioned. Can we go ahead and start looking at the future and saying, okay, what can be done virtually and what really needs to be done face to face? And if you haven't started having those conversations within your organization, I highly encourage that you be the spark. Because there are going to be, we've already received, like I said, policies from hospitals that things are going to be different. And, you mentioned the meals. It may be that you can't be there for the meals, and you have to find different ways to do those or continue to do them in the virtual perspective. So, yeah, I encourage everyone to start having that. But I also encourage that you do think about all the departments, regulatory, they still have to, stay on label. Drug approvals are still happening. The FDA is still working and changing guidance, so making sure that making sure that there's some sort of reminder about what they can and cannot say from a compliance perspective, but also from the FDA's perspective. They can monitor a virtual program too, and making sure that who's responsible for the training. Having someone, it doesn't have to be you, it doesn't have to be your department. If you feel like there's a need for IT because you're hearing, for example, I was on a speaker program and it kept crashing. I couldn't hear the speaker and it kept cutting in and out. There's a problem. There's a compliance issue there. If you can't hear the speaker, or the slides go out, you've missed part of the program. The FDA says everything has to be, as approved and fair and balanced. You could have just taken away some balance by having that. So, getting people to understand business knowledge, decision support, whatever you call them in IT, how to properly handle those situations doesn't necessarily have to be compliant. So, figuring out how to train, I think we've kind of, beat it in everyone's head that there's a lot of technology that will allow you to do that, but think outside the box. You can go old school. You can send things in the mail to people. You can send them an email. There's different ways. I mean, I think if you send somebody mail right now, they'd probably pay a lot more attention to it than they would other methods that are out there. So consider some different ways of doing training. And make sure that you're doing training on the virtual interactions. Sharing best practices is a good way when topics come up. I think best practices is definitely within your team. Have people share it with you so you can do, training documents based off the best practices as well.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. And I think one of the topics, during the conduct of these activities is going to be around monitoring. And I know it's another, now that ride-alongs are becoming Zoom-alongs, the question really is how do you deal with the monitoring of these activities that are virtual? And because I think compliance programs traditionally have been so dependent on doing some of these live monitoring activities, in addition to, of course, your desktop and analytical monitoring. How does a virtual work? I mean, it seems like, at least as a technology solution provider in this space, it feels like you could perhaps do many more monitoring activities, even if we're doing manually, because of the travel time gone away and the logistics make it a lot easier. And perhaps you could embed some more technology components there as well. But on the other side, it also feels like that, having the rules of engagement have to change. Right? What do you monitor for? What do you look for? So if you can highlight some of the things that you found or experienced, Donna, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. There are tools within some of these platforms that will help you monitor. And part of the DOJ's guidance update really was focused on data, looking, having access to the data. And so as a compliance person, if you haven't already addressed that part of it, getting with your departments now, this is a great time to do it because it is something you can easily do remotely. Is working with the teams, the commercial teams, your IT teams, your business support or business knowledge decision support, whatever you call that market, the group that owns commercial data in your organization. This is a good time to start asking them and getting, what do you have? And I think when you find what you have, then you also find what you can monitor. So things like, data, obviously, but the engagements themselves, who do they take place with, how often are speakers being used, because some speakers just don't like doing virtual engagements. They only want to do live programs. And so, are you finding that the same speakers, being used over and over, and that could be an issue? Are you looking at notes? So if this is something you do regularly, I would, make sure you're doing it now as well. Reviewing that data, if you already have what you do already have, making sure you're reviewing it. Expense reports, if they're doing meals virtually, reviewing the expense reports, monitoring for inconsistencies, making sure all the information is captured, that they're not doing it the same place over and over again. I have found that they are having to do shifts more in order to catch everybody, where it used to be people would, come in like 3 groups and come in lunchroom and you could do the in-services, that now it's become more of like morning, mid-morning, late morning, afternoon. And so they're having to log back on in some cases to continue to capture everybody in the in-service more than when they could do it live and just grab somebody and kind of drag them into it. Now it has to be more structured and scheduled, but that should be all documented. So making sure you're checking the documentation. I think that if you think about from a compliance standpoint, think about what you've used in the past or those things that you can apply to the virtual situation. And last but certainly not least, and as you mentioned, we do have people who are, we've used third party monitor to jump in on one of the calls, but our medical affairs staff has found that they have extra time on their hands because they're not able to go out and have those interactions in some of the sites. So getting internal people who can also help to monitor, whether that be the in-services during lunch, or whether that be the speaker programs, or just helping to review ad boards and things like that, where you normally wouldn't have them as monitors. You might consider them to be used as monitors, but don't forget about those third-party ones that you used previously, because they also can certainly do monitoring remotely as well.
That's a good point about engaging third-party monitors. I think if you, I guess technology can definitely help there as well. If you can put together some sort of a monitoring tool that can capture their inputs, that would be great. I think we can move to the last topic in this conversation. And just a reminder for the audience, if you have additional questions or thoughts that you want Donna to chime in on, please do send those in the questions box or the chat box, and we'll tackle them as we get close to the end of this webinar. So in terms of Sunshine Act, what are some of the challenges and concerns that you were seeing when we're doing this all of this virtually, Donna?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question right there, and this was probably one of the very first ones that had to be tackled out of the box when everything went virtual. But there's continuing to be new challenges and questions that have come up. So it's definitely something that everyone should be actively monitoring as well. But from a compliance standpoint, when someone's scheduling these virtual programs for like in-services, whether there's lunch or breakfast, stressing to the team how important that point of contact is at the office or hospital is just, I can't even start to talk about how important that is and emphasize it enough. That person is going to be responsible for doing a lot of things. You as a company have to make a decision of, are you going to get a virtual signature? One person, actually 2 people now, have told me that they're requiring the reps to take pictures, like screenshots of people to prove that they're there. But I found that in what's easily is just being able to send a sign-in sheet to the point of contact and asking them to collect the signatures. That way you have one person there that can be that lead. That way if you have questions, you can't read handwriting, they didn't fill it out completely, there's discrepancies between how many meals were told that you would need versus how many signatures you captured. Having that point person makes it a whole lot easier to manage. So finding somebody that's a good, strong point person. From what I understand, some hospitals and offices have found this to be the case too, and they have designated somebody who now that's their job as being the point person. So it could have been the scheduling person from before, but that's not necessarily what we're hearing. So I think, stressing that everybody needs that point person. You have to make the decision. We are requiring sign-in sheets still, and nothing's changed there for us, but I know for others it may have. You also have to make a decision as a company if you're going to keep the same meal limits or make them less. I know some companies have decided to make decisions because they can't have as much face-to-face interaction. They may, they're not there to see the people that they want to make it a very small spend to kind of limit the liability. That's totally for each company to decide. If you're going to change the frequency, you can do them. For instance, a lot of the hospitals right now are doing longer periods on and off. I know they're for a while. I think it's let up a bit now, but New York, as an example, had hospitals where they were going in for like a few days at a time, pretty much sleeping at the hospital and then going home, so that they could not have a risk of interaction in between. So I think you kind of got to make decisions on, are you going to allow them to do it one every, you have to do it 5 days, but 5 days later you have to let them do it again because it's not the same people are not supposed to be there. But again, that gets back to, are you reviewing? So if they did it 5 days earlier and they do it today, are they doing it? Are they just seeing the same people and sending meals all the time to the same people? So these are things that as a company you just have to make a decision on how much you want flexibility. Telemedicine has been a hot topic. Like I said, even the government addressed it with PDMA recently. But are you going to provide meals to somebody in their home? Are you going to let them participate in programs? I've heard people do it both ways. We do not, but others are. So that's, again, a decision that each company has to make. But you need to document your decisions. So if you're going to allow it, you need to document that you allowed it. You're doing it now, you're doing it forever, because if investigation somebody comes in to do an investigation and they're going to see your SOP and there's nothing in it about allowing meals to be shipped to someone's home under these particular circumstances, they're going to question why you did this and it's outside your policy. So make sure that you are documenting anything that you're doing, allowing short-term, or make it a permanent in the case of you're going to always allow that for telemedicine as an example. Reminders of required documentation, making sure still, even though it's a point person, you still need receipts, you still need whatever backup, you need sign in, you need to make sure there are appropriate people there. Just reminding them of that, to monitor it, to this is not just difficult for the representatives, it's difficult for the HCPs, but they still want to have education. They're being faced in different worlds. Many of them have as much, or they're laid off because they're not the specialty that treats COVID patients, or they were considered non-essential and so they've been on a shutdown period. So they're at home Googling and trying to learn things. But there was a study not too long ago that with oncologists that's where they learned their businesses from pharmaceutical, or learn what's going on new in the world. And there's a lot going on new in the world. So I'd expect that in the pharma world they're going to want to see the representatives. They may not be able to see them in the same way that they were able to see them before, but they definitely still want to see the pharma representatives in some form or fashion. So get that sunshine data and make sure that you get it and that you're looking at it and paying attention to it.
No, that's a lot of good information, Donna. Just I guess capturing what I heard. Sign-in sheets. I think in your case you said are still required. And the one big thing that I heard was importance for having a point of contact at the physician's office. I think that's a critical aspect, because what I've heard from the reps is one of the key challenges they're having in this period is sending the sign-in sheet or the required documentation that needs to be sent back from the practice, and having to chase that point person for many days to get that. So that's been a challenge. But I think, as you mentioned earlier, just how do you hold that to account, right? So if someone can get signatures for you, how reliable are they? And I think the idea for taking pictures while on the Zoom call, I know one of our customers, they require that the physical, while they're doing the in-service remotely, that the sign-in sheet is placed right next where it's visible in the Zoom camera, and they can see who's coming in and signing in. So there's different ways that organizations are looking at to establish this proof. So
And
I think
Mohammed,
that,
just one
yeah,
thing on that, if I could, I would be amiss if I did not mention the privacy aspect. And the can spam rules that are out there that, we are working in a world that technology also requires opting in. And so making sure that your technology that you're providing, that you do have HCPs that have opted in to receive your emails and your information is still very important as well.
okay, that's fantastic. Would love to have a little bit more detailed conversation on that at some point, but we have a couple of questions, and I know we have only a few
Right.
minutes. I'd like to get those addressed. So the first question is, what is the leeway that you're providing when a sign-in sheet is incomplete?
I'm sorry, what is what?
What is the leeway? So do you provide any freedom, or do you
Mhm.
are you very strict?
We have not been. We're actually doing a refresher training on making sure that people know that those have to be filled in properly. We are getting some that are like pre-populated, and then it's just a check the box because they are trying to avoid contact as well. So it's a check the box. So I guess you could consider that leeway, but we still there's no leeway on requirement, but there's a leeway given the fact that whoever the point of contact has the list of people and they're just checking the box for the ones that come in and then attesting to that sign-in sheet by being the point of contact.
I guess the question did have an explanation, which was in terms of leeway. The question was, are you allowing certain fields to be not completed, or do you chase them down to complete the sign-in sheet in its entirety?
Yeah, and I think that's the purpose of the point of contact, that if you have whatever you need for documentation, and you can fill in the blanks, or you can go back, and that again, if you have the point of contact that's somebody that you can go back and forth with, then you can get any boxes filled in that are missing. But you need something as documentation, because probably anyone who's dealt with Sunshine for any amount of time now has had that dispute of the doctor saying, I did not participate in any lunch with you, and you having to go back out and pull the documentation up. So while there can be some leeway, and maybe you don't get every field filled out because you can fill it out based off the person's ID, it's more important that the point of contact is getting the proper information for you, and if it's not filled out, that you can go back to them and ask questions.
Fantastic. And I think one of the just as a side note, which I wasn't intending to bring into this conversation, but at Core Data, we are looking at, we've started to develop a solution for remote sign-in sheets for sales reps to enable the point of contact at the physician office to really fill it out with the appropriate details, and then also enabling it for sales reps where at the press of a button, they can, the sign-in sheet will then submit the data into Concur as well. So all of that manual effort in the middle can be avoided. Happy to, if anyone from the audience wants to have a early look, it's not finished. Happy to walk them through. So I think we're coming to the end of time. Really valuable and great information, Donna. So I just want to thank you so much for taking out the time. I know you've been very busy with internal initiatives and that international panel that you're part of at Chiesi. So amongst this crazy time, you were able to make this time and provide us this fantastic value and information. And thank you everyone in the audience as well. I know we're a little Zoom tired, but you made the hour, and hopefully you got value. I'd love to get comments, and if there's any additional questions that come through, we'll be happy to send them over to Donna and get back questions for you. Thank you, everyone. Donna,
Thanks,
if you have any
everyone.
final words, then we'll.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Good luck. Stay safe.
All right.